Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and this is News and Week in Review, although a little lighter on the news this week, if only because I am filming this early, because I'm about to head to Dice Tower West very, very shortly. Like, soon. Way too soon. In any case, let's go ahead and dive into this. As usual, timestamps down below, links to all the various things, but starting off with Diced Veggies. KTBG, Kids Tales Board Games, they announced their next game, which specifically is going to be Diced Veggies, a game about cutting up veggies and using them like dice to a degree. I think that's what the cover art seems to indicate. Also, apologies, I don't have my usual laptop and art stuff. There's only a few pieces of news, and only a few of them deserve pictures, although this one definitely deserved pictures. Oh, so did that one, and that one. 3 of these things probably deserve pictures. I'm sorry. From there we have Catapult Feud TV show. Basically, Catapult Feud is a game that is apparently being made into a TV show, and if you're as skeptical as I am, I mean, I don't know if you're skeptical, but I am as skeptical as I am, I'm skeptical. You see, here's the thing when it comes to adapting things to other media. Okay, let's take a step back. When you adapt something to another media, you either have to be scaling down in narrative, or you have to be adding a ton of work and effort and energy to make it work. What do I mean by that? This should be the topic of the week. Let's make this the topic of the week. I'll come back to it. I'm going to change the topic of the week. The topic of the week was going to be a conversation around 12 by 12 challenge and depth and games and all that stuff. We'll come back to that. Let's go back to this. This will be the topic of the week. Next up on the news is something that is another piece that deserved the artwork. Maybe I'll throw pictures in after. Maybe. I don't know. But Comet from Funtails. That's the newest game, and in general, Funtails games look great, and that's no exception for Comet. Looks great. Looks intriguing. Don't know anything about the gameplay. I only just found out that this game exists. Additionally, we have some news about Boss Monster, or more specifically, Brotherwise Games. They're basically opening the Discord, or they're having some sort of contest around Boss Monster. I don't know the exact details. I'll have a link down below in case you want some sort of contest where you can win something, and or join the Brotherwise Discord in case you want to check that out. Jill Hova and Formal Ferret Games, or more specifically Formal Ferret Games, owned by Jill Hova, is unfortunately closing down. I don't know if Jill is or is not still designing things or not. Or is it Gil? Gil? I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know. But either way, that's going to be Formal Ferret Games is closing down, unfortunately. And then lastly, of course, we have Zombicide White Death, which for those of you, this always happens to me. I film my news and week in review, and usually I film them on Thursday, and then something pops up on Friday, and people are like, why is this not in your news and week in review? And the answer is always because I can't be everywhere all the time. These things are filmed in advance and they go up a day and a half later, and so it is what it is. And sometimes that means I miss very cool things like Zombicide White Death. Ironically, by the way, last week's topic of the week was about the nature of having too much of a good thing, too much content for games. And I'm like, oh, there's so many Zombicides and so many Nemesis. And I was like, we're going to have Zombicide Pirates and Zombicide Ninjas. And they're like, no, actually. You know how you like medieval Zombicide? We're going to go back to medieval Zombicide with more Zombicide, not Black Plague, but White Death. What does this mean for me? I don't know. You see, of course I want it. Of course I'll probably get it all. I'll justify it because, hey, as a content creator, I'll cover it, I'll unbox it, I'll do all this stuff, I'll play it, and then maybe it stays around, maybe it doesn't. And I mean it when I say maybe it stays around, maybe it doesn't. Because I love Zombicide Black Plague. It is my favorite, one of my favorites. I have 3 favorite Zombicide systems at this point. It's one of my favorite Zombicide systems. I adore it. But I also have so much medieval content that I just don't need more. Now, does that mean that I don't want more? No, but it does mean that it has to integrate and or add value in a way for it to be interesting. Otherwise, I'll start picking and choosing. Maybe I'll get White Death and get rid of Green Horde. I can see that happening. Possibly. I'm in trouble, aren't I? I'm in trouble. You see, I like the variability of all the stuff. I never really play with the orcs, and I don't need those, but I definitely want all the heroes from Green Horde, and then some of those abominations are super cool too. Maybe I just get rid of the extra stuff for Green Horde. Honestly, it's so condensed, who really cares? It's all like the same rule set, and it's all in like a different box. That's one of the issues as well as Zombicide. Like, I have 3 different games with 3 different rule sets that are similar but not exactly the same. As long as White Death sticks to the same rule set and or whatever rule changes they make backwards compatible, then I guess if it's one system, I'm okay with it. Maybe. Because it's just going to be 1 more box, maybe 2. I'll condense the heck out of that. I don't care how much stuff they have. They're going to give me giant dragons, aren't they? This is going to be like, whatever. We'll figure it out. Zombicide White Death. Of course I'm getting it. I'm in trouble. Anyways, with that, let's go ahead and move on to the topic of the week, which is a last-minute adjustment to the schedule. The topic of the week is the nature of adapting mediums, adapting content from different mediums, which is an interesting conversation, specifically inspired by Catapult Feud TV show, which, coincidentally enough, was one of our news discussions a second ago. But basically, when you adapt content from one medium to another, you either have to put a lot of work and effort into the world building of why that exists and how it can be adapted, or you have to be scaling downwards. Now, what I mean by scaling downwards is, for example, taking a video game, taking a universe like Marvel, for example, and making a board game or a card game or whatever out of it. You're scaling downwards. You're providing the assets, the characters. You're providing some rules and constructs, but the world building is taken out of that, and so it works because players can take the world building that exists within this medium, within this content, and then extrapolate it downwards, something that is more lo-fi. That doesn't work in the reverse. You can't simply take a Catan board game and say, hey, now we have Catan movies coming out. You have to put a reason and universe into why and how that exists. Whatever the degree of story and world building and lore you have to make sure to scale it upwards as you go to more hi-fi versions of media, both of those things. So, for example, we have the D&D universe that's being put into a movie, and that requires a degree of escalation for sure, because we have all these abstract concepts that have a ton of world building, but you're applying it to specific characters and you're building upwards using the framework of something that's kind of just medieval in genre, and you have to figure out how to adapt and put things in while being true to the storytelling. So it has enough, D&D has enough creative storytelling and world building and all these things behind it that it's more about picking and choosing how you put the parts together, but that universe is there. In Catan, the universe is not there. Catan is not a movie. Nothing about Catan is a movie in any way, shape, and form. This is why you take things like the Street Fighter, fighting video game, and you turn it into a movie, and they suck. Mortal Kombat, still not that great. Because you're taking something that has mechanical connection to the players, and you're suddenly adding story on top of that. You have to put a lot of work and effort and energy because you're increasing the amount of narrative, the amount of world building and story in it, and you have to pull players along with that because they didn't start that way. Again, going back to Marvel as a concept, you take, or what other TV shows are there? Dune. We have the Dune board game. You take the Dune movie and put it down to the Dune board game, everyone's good to go, because you have a very hi-fi rich backstory, and then you're simply lowering it to mechanics and constructs from within that, and so players can pull the backstory with them if it's wanted, meaning if you know the Dune universe and you walk into the Dune experiences, having that backstory there if you know it, and it's also not necessary if you don't. Meaning you don't have to know. You could play Dune Imperium and never once have ever read or watched anything to do with Dune, and the mechanics are enough because the game is focused on the mechanics. So you have to be mindful of the mediums you have, the mediums you have, and how and where you're moving from one medium to the next. Six Siege goes from a video game to a board game. That works. Both are fairly low in their narrative backstory, and you're simply moving mechanical shifts from one to another, but you're not trying to build up in narrative. You are moving sideways or possibly down when you go from a video game to a board game. Which brings us back to Catapult Feud, the TV show, which is a board game about flinging rocks at each other and knocking down each other's castles. Do you remember the Battleship movie? Hopefully not, because it wasn't that great. Battleship was the fact that they made Battleship the board game into a Battleship movie is mind-boggling. But I feel that's what we have happening with Catapult Feud, the TV show. Unless this is like a real-life kind of, contest situation, like people building giant catapults and actually building their giant walls. So you have players, they call it kind of like a reality TV show contest. That could actually work because you don't need the narrative backstory. It's all about the game. But if you're actually building a universe, a TV show out of Catapult Feud, I don't understand what you have happening here that is in any way different than Battleship. And it's not to say that it can't succeed, it's to say that you have to put a ton of work into it to make it succeed, and it feels like you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Like, why? What is the narrative reason for this to exist? I think Catan is an excellent game, but I think if you make a Catan movie, that is a leap. That is a leap of faith. Why? What is this movie about? Moving to an island and building things? Who cares? Like, just what? D&D, again, D&D has enough narrative lore and backstory and all these things and all these constructs in there that there's almost like a reason. Like, hey, I want to explore and invest myself in this universe in a different setting. There's a reason we watch people play role-playing games because it brings you along on that journey, and so now they're just doing it within a narrative framework of the universe. I guess my overall point is, I don't see this working out well. I don't see it working out well. I think you are trying too hard to make something work that doesn't have enough reason or incentive for it to work. Just make a TV show that happens to have catapults and they're attacking each other, and that probably has a better chance of success rather than trying to make this fit. Now, that said, I'm sure better people than myself have thought this through and know what they're doing. Also see previous failures and disasters of people who I thought would know what they're doing but didn't. So there's that. And that is our topic of the week, the nature of transforming content from one media to another. Which brings us to the week in review. The week in review starting with a 12 by 12 challenge update. This time we actually do have a significant update from last week. I have played Castle of Burgundy 12 times. At least 12 times. I've played Castle of Burgundy at least 12 times this past week. I've gone through it very heavily, very extensively. I have this week, or next week I think, we have a Feast for, next week. This past week we had the Feast for Odin 12 by 12 video. In general, again, for me, there's a few things going on with my 12 by 12 challenge. First of all, is playing the game 12 times, but then secondly is exploring the game in a bunch of different formats or modes. And so for Castle of Burgundy, I haven't yet gotten there. I still want to play with the Vineyards expansion, which I haven't done so, and I have access to the Vineyards expansion from Castle of Burgundy from the Awakened Realms copy. Once I play it with the Vineyards expansion, you can expect content on the game. Until then, I've played it at least 12 times in the past week, and I mean, don't get me wrong, Castle of Burgundy is a bit of a cheat, because that's a game I've played over 50 times since I got it 12 years ago. And so, yeah, I definitely have plenty of plays of that under my belt. And this year, I just happen to have landed at least 12 more in the past week alone. But I'll be diving into it with the expansion, the Vineyards expansion, at which point I'll do a 12 by 12 video review content update all around the game. But with and that's basically the only update I have there. I haven't played any of the other games significantly. I dove into my first game of Caverna, which is one of my backups on my 12 by 12 challenge. I might also be adding Agricola. At this point, I've heavily been just diving into the BGA games, Board Game Arena games, and then augmenting that with real plays so I can get all the other content I need. So for example, Feast of Odin, I can play it on BGA, but I can't play with the expansion, so I've been augmenting it with real life plays. Castle of Burgundy, I can play it on BGA, but I can't play with the expansions, so I've been augmenting it with real life plays. But those are the easiest ones to knock out. I think this 12 by 12 challenge is going to be pretty easy, but primarily because I am using Board Game Arena for like 70% of my plays as I go through this, and then just rounding it out with plays in person. But with that said, that's going to be the 12 by 12 challenge, so I'm done with Arnak. I'm mostly done with Arnak. I still have to play it solo with campaign. Mostly done with Arnak, done with Feast of Odin, still playing Feast of Odin. Almost done with Castle of Burgundy. That's 3 games down, and we got plenty of months left in the year. From there, moving on to what I played, starting off with Castles of Burgundy. The Castle of Burgundy I've been playing a lot this past week, and it still holds up. Diving into this game, I mean, this was my number 2 game last year, and then it dropped back to number 19 this past year. I don't think it reclaims number 2, and I don't know what made it so high. I don't know why. Like, there was a point where I was like, boom, this is my second favorite game, and I don't think it's there. I don't think it's top 10 for me right now, and part of that might be just how much I've played it. Diving into Castle of Burgundy this past week has proven to me that 50 plus plays later, I can still dive into this 12 times in a single week and not have a single qualm about feeling I'd rather play something else. It is a game that is rewarding. It is a game that is experiential. It's a game that gives you a lot of different pathways to how you can optimize around it, and I'm still trying to figure out how many times I can break. Like, I've never broken 300, or at least I don't recall ever breaking 300. That'd be amazing if I could do so, although that'd be an amazing score. I don't even know if it's possible. I'd have to do the math on, like, can I math out the perfect score and sequence that is even possible? Don't know. But either way, it's a game that holds up, and I still enjoy diving into it. I want to play it with the Vineyards expansion. I want to see what that adds. But Castle of Burgundy is one of my most played games in my collection. Anything that has over 50 plays is one of my most played games in my collection, and Castle of Burgundy is one of 2 games I've had since I got it when I first got into the hobby. From there, we have Townsfolk Tussle. I have coverage of this game either this past week or next week. I think it's next week. I think Townsfolk Tussle coverage is coming next week, but I've dove back into Townsfolk Tussle because of the new expansion content, Nefarious Neighbors and Odd Jobs, and so I went back to playing it, and it's still good. I have not played Townsfolk Tussle in a while. That's one of those game systems that I both really like and also have doubts about. You see, Townsfolk Tussle, to me, mechanically speaking and mechanically speaking alone, would not be in my collection. It's a good game. It's a very good game, but on pure mechanics alone, there are other game systems I'd rather play. But the theme, the immersion, the variety of bosses, the way you build out your characters, the sheer character and atmosphere in this game enhances it to the point that it's a game I'm happy to own, and diving back into it to play through all the new bosses and Nefarious Neighbors and Odd Jobs, as well as the new characters, well, at least the ones I have in my content. There's more content in the game that'll be coming. My sampler box for preview content has 4 bosses, 2 characters. I played through all that, plus the new content for the Odd Jobs. Lots of fun stuff, and it just reaffirmed how much I enjoy the system and how much fun I have when I play through it. And I will say, it's also like some of my plays, I dove into it both with a friend and solo to like reacquaint myself with it, and I will say I don't know whether I've changed or the game's changed. I don't really know, but I enjoyed it more solo than I have in the past. I controlled 3 characters with one of the games I was playing through, because basically, for context, I was playing through the new round mode has it reduced to 3 bosses instead of 4, but I wanted to experience all the bosses. So I played through a sequence of the 3 bosses, and then I just played through a final fight, kind of simulated and read the final fight solo, just so I can experience that 4th boss. And so playing it solo 3-handed was not bad at all. It was totally fun and totally fine, and while I definitely have more fun playing it with multiple players, I enjoyed it. I think for me, the go-to is either 3 players playing it 1 character each, 4 players 1 character each, 2 players 2 characters each, or 1 player 3 characters is the way I've so far enjoyed it. And yeah, it holds up. From there, we move on to Huang. Huang is a game that I've had a chance to dive into this past week. I've played through Tigers and Euphrates, I've played through Yellow and Yangtze, and I finally played through Huang as well, which is basically Yellow and Yangtze. There is additional modules over on the Game Found page, but for me, with the content I've gotten to experience, is just more Yellow and Yangtze. It's the same basic game, just with... It actually kind of messes with you a bit, because if you've played Yellow and Yangtze, there's certain colors that you have access to as far as the way the game works, and Huang kind of changes some of those colors, so you have to, like, mentally remember that black is really now... yellow. Black is yellow. Yeah, you see, I have to pause to like think through it and try to remember how it works. But yeah, that's basically, the game system is excellent. It works well. I still prefer Tigers and Euphrates more, but Huang is a enjoyable game that gives you, again, Huang and Yellow and Yangtze are enjoyable games that give you the core feeling of Tigers and Euphrates, with some things I consider improvements and some things I consider a step back, but overall thoroughly enjoyable. And that's going to be the quick recap of some of the games I've played, and moving on to there into the week in review, starting off with this past Saturday. Saturday we had a review for Ynaros Fallin. I gave that a 3.5 out of 5. I really liked some of the systems that are going on there, and especially when you move to level 2 of the game comes in multiple levels. It gives you a very enjoyable puzzle of trying to claim lands, which are basically abilities, while also trying to make sure you score as many points as possible, which you also do through claiming lands and getting involved in combats. But then the second level really enhances it with a very strong tactical play as far as how you mess up the board, so that's easier for you and hard for your opponent. Gives you a strong degree of how you try to play through the system that is really enjoyable. For me, the main thing holding it back is that there are like 4 or 5 different ways of playing the game, and each one involves relearning certain aspects of the game. Kind of reminds me a bit of Harrow County. Harrow County was similarly a great system that I found there were enough modes of play that I was like, I don't know if I'm going to heavily dive into this. So I like it with caveats. Moving on, later on Saturday, we had a review for Earth, which I gave a 4 out of 5. I have a side story here, but before I get to that, Earth is a great game. I give it a 4 out of 5. To me, it's not as good as Terraforming Mars and Everdell and whatnot. There's a bunch of game systems that's being compared to. It's being compared to Everdell, to Wingspan, to Terraforming Mars, to Arc Nova. I see the comparisons to Arc Nova and Terraforming Mars on a very lighter scale. It's definitely has some aspects of that while being very lighter on what it does, which is the main appeal of it. It is easy to sit down and table through it. I'm currently in the middle of a game of BGA in it as I'm diving into it again and again, and I'm enjoying what it does while not feeling a particular connection to the cards. And I've had people give me a flack about that, like, what do you mean the connection to the cards? And my answer there is the fact that different game systems have different degrees of connection. But when I'm drafting a hand of cards from Terraforming Mars, if I'm drafting a hand of cards, every single card there is important to me, and passing them on to you hurts as I try to think through how it works for my engine. When I'm playing through Earth, if I was drafting, which is not drafting, but if I was drafting, I'd be like, I don't care. Like, I mean, sure, this one has an attribute a little bit, but, like, it doesn't have the same degree of connection to what I have. The same problem I have with Everdell versus Wingspan. Everdell, I want the certain cards, and Wingspan, I'm kind of like, whatever, I'll make it work for my engine, it's all fine. There's a disconnect between what I need in some games, Everdell and Terraforming Mars, versus what I'm ambiently okay with having and will make it work, such as in Wingspan and Earth. Again, these are all well-weighted games, it's just a question of what works for me the most. The thing I found the most interesting is the publisher posted my review on Facebook and saying, hey, he's not as enthusiastic as, like, Dice Tower, but he still really likes the game. And someone, like, commented, oh no, like, you know, I don't really align with that guy's tastes. You know, if he doesn't like it, I'm sure I'll love it. So we're at the point now that if I give a game a 4 out of 5, I'm now being critiqued for being not positive enough. And if I give a game a 4.5 out of 5, I'm a hype man and too positive. So, and again, not to you, but it's fun watching the internets, and I actually have a video coming up with this next week, but watching the internets, there's always subsets of people you just can't make happy, but I found it particularly ironic that this thread started a few people who are upset that I was not as excited about Earth as they wanted me to be, and I got flack for not being positive enough. So there is that. Both ways, either way. Moving on to Sunday. That was Sunday, we had board games leaving for the month of February. Going through a bunch of games leaving for the month of February, a bunch of hard choices, including one I even reconsidered. Basically, I have to cull things all the time. It's the price of getting things in, it's the price of finding things you love. You have to keep a reasonably sized collection, and to that end, I keep the things that I often find myself turning to play. Great games are great games, but if you're not playing them, they have to go at a certain point. Lots of hard choices in February's video, and some that will be passed on to other players as well. On Monday, we had to back or not to back, going through a bunch of crowdfunding campaigns. I really am holding fairly strong on not backing most things right now. I've been fairly conservative. I managed to not back a lot, and I hope to continue that trend of not backing a lot as time goes on, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm still backing things. I'm just backing a lot less than I used to. On Tuesday, we had a review for Huang. I think I had that up first in the video, so Tuesday was Huang. I gave it a, did I even review it? Did I even rate it? I think I gave it a 4 out of 5. I gave it a 4 out of 5. To me, Tigers and Euphrates is the better system, but Huang is still excellent, and Tigers and Euphrates is not really available. Then later on Tuesday, we had a review for Tiny Ninja Tournaments. This is an interesting one because Tiny Ninja Tournaments is more of a dexterity game, more of an experience than a game, kind of akin to the Mind, where I think the Mind is a lot of fun, but I think it's more of an experience than a game. Similarly, Tiny Ninja Tournament feels like you're playing through a bunch of carnival games. Very enjoyable. My biggest complaint is kind of trying to cram it all back into the box and rebuild it. I almost just wish there was a bigger box and just not having to like make it all fit every single time. But ultimately, I do like the game system. I think it's a bunch of solid little carnival games. I don't even remember what I rated it because those are tricky to rate because not really a game, but very enjoyable. And then from there, we had later on Tuesday, we had a review for Hellbringer. Hellbringer is a very solid game. I really enjoy it. That's an active Kickstarter right now. My biggest complaint against Hellbringer is I don't love the graphic design or the table mats or any of that, but the actual game is a lot of fun as you basically face off against a bunch of monsters and then build up your own character until you eventually take down the final boss, which whatever scenario you get to. And there's a lot of expansion content too. Again, the graphic design is my biggest issue with it. I wish it were more polished and more clean, which is always a problem. That one to me is a tricky one. Rating-wise, the gameplay is an easy 4. I scaled it back to a 3.5 purely based on the graphic design and where it's at. I do find, practically speaking, that when a game doesn't pull me in visually, I have a harder time tabling it, and sometimes they leave the collection because I just find myself not gravitating towards it. To be very clear, I want Hellbringer. I want it in my collection. I enjoy the game system, but I also know myself, and I know in the past I've gotten rid of those games, so it's one of those weird kind of middling reviews because I don't know where it'll end up as far as the graphical changes, if there are any or not. It's a great game. It just doesn't pull me in visually, and that does make it less likely to be tabled. On Wednesday we had a 7 Wonders versus 7 Wonders duel. Play this, not that, between the two game systems with Devin and myself, comparing the systems, telling you which one we prefer, which one we'd pick, and why. Lots of nuanced opinions. We both like both of them. That's not entirely true. Watch the video. You can find out more there. Then later on Wednesday, we had a review for Deadly Dowagers. This is coming to you from Starling Games, maybe, I don't remember. Deadly Dowagers is a game of basically being a wife as you proceed to murder multiple husbands on your path to marry the Duke. Yes, that's exactly what it is. But either way, I gave that a 3 out of 5. I enjoyed the game system. I thought the game itself, I thought the mechanics of the game were fine. The theme was the main appeal over there. The rest was, the theme was the main appeal. The art was solid, but the mechanics were okay without being particularly impressive. And then later on Wednesday, we had a Feast for Odin 12x12 review. This is me going over my Feast for Odin experiences, talking about, you know, all the ways I've played through Feast for Odin, how my opinion is currently holding up, and I'm currently like 25 plays into this game in 2023. I'm well past the 12x12 and I'm still going. It is just such a good system. I think it's incredible. I would be surprised if it's not in my top 10 next year, with the caveat that there's a bunch of games that I want to be in my top 10, and I think there's like 20 games I want to be in my top 10, so we'll see what ultimately happens there. And then from there, we move on to Thursday. Thursday was a video of my most overdue campaigns. I did this video last year, and I think I'm going to make it a yearly thing, to do a video every single year covering which campaigns are outstanding for me, how long they've been outstanding, just talking with them. Not necessarily driven by any flack or degree of, like, you know, giving anyone a hard time. In some cases I will, and you'll see that in the video. In some cases I expect better, and in other cases I'm kind of like, it is what it is, and I just hope I get my games. But you can check out that video in case you want to see the, I don't know, 14 or so games that I have outstanding for anywhere from 12 months to 3 years late as far as how these games go. On Friday we had a video for what we backed in February. This is Rena and myself going over the games we backed in February. There are not a lot. This is actually games we backed in February and January. In case you missed it, I skipped last month. There was not a what we backed for January because there were only like 4 games that ended in January that I was even partially interested in, and I didn't back any of them. So I was like, whatever, we'll combine January into February, which we did, and we did in a single video, and I only backed 2 of them. So it's a little bit more boring than usual, but at least I saved money, so there is that. And that brings us to today. Oh, and then Friday, there may have been an unboxing later in the day as well. We'll see. I don't know if I'll have time. There's so many things happening. Which brings us to today. Today we have a few videos going up. We have a preview for KO Corral, which was supposed to go up last week. It got pushed. Things get rearranged all the time, so a preview for KO Corral will be going up. And then also a review for Tragedy Looper from WizKids will be going up as well. Tragedy Looper, New Tragedies. And then next week we have a few things popping up. First of all, we're going to have on Monday, instead of 2 back or not to back, we're going to have the most expensive crowdfunding games I have backed ever. The 12 most expensive crowdfunding games. And then over on Patreon, I'll also be doing the second 12 most expensive. And the reason I'm doing 12 is because 12 games brought me to anything over 500, and then 12 games brought me to anything over 350, and that was the cutoff. Once you get to $300, there's way too many games that I spent $300 on at this point, or at least too many games. So yeah, those two videos are popping up over on Patreon and on the main channel on Monday. And then past that, we have 2021 games that faded for me as well, going up later next week. Basically, games I played from 2021 that somehow went down in how much I viewed them. That was actually supposed to go up like 2 weeks ago, but I mixed up 2 videos, so now you get to see that one instead. And with that, we get to talk about the games on the table, which are all in shrink, and the reason for this is because I don't know if I'll actually play any of these. Usually when I put games on the table, at least one of them gets played, and usually 2 or 3 get played. Very rarely all 4 get played. This week, though, is a little different. This week I'm picking games in shrink that I own that I want to table, and these are all games I hope to be playing at Dice Tower West, either now, as we speak right now, or alternatively, if you're watching this video and you're still here Saturday or Sunday or whenever, and you want to sit down and play a game, if you see any of these games, if you know how to play them and you want to play with me, seek me out, because I'm down to learn Witchstone, to learn Age of Atlantis, to learn Tabanusi, or Gutenberg, or like 14 million other games too, but these are some of the games I have in my collection that I would love to get played, and so I specifically grabbed 4 in-shrink games off the shelf so that next week I can have them in shrink on the table and say, look, I still played them even though they're in shrink. I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical I actually will. Maybe one. If I can get at least one of these 4, I consider that a win already. And with that, that is your week in review. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I am about 2 minutes late for an appointment, and until next time, I hope you have a good one.